The roses were still cool from the florist's fridge when I walked into the hotel lobby bar. I remember the marble under my heels clean, echoing, deliberate. I'd planned it like a movie scene. Surprise him during his Denver work trip. Hand him the bouquet, maybe catch him off guard in the best way. 7 years married, and I still wanted to believe in surprises. The bar hummed with low jazz, glass tinkling, laughter pouring from business suits loosened by whiskey. And then, amid the blur of people, I saw him. My husband, Ryan. Dark blazer, loosened tie, head tilted toward a woman whose perfume traveled before her laughter. Her hand was on his chest. His hand was on her thigh. "Relax, baby," he said, loud enough for the bartender to grin. "My wife thinks I'm in Denver." For a heartbeat, everything stopped. The saxophone's breath caught in its brass throat. A glass slipped somewhere, hit tile, and rolled. The sound of it spun in my ear like slow thunder. I didn't move. I didn't gasp or run. Instead, I let the roses slide gently from my arm. Their red petals brushed my wrists soft, almost apologetic. I placed them upright on the polished counter beside me, stems aligned, thorns facing outward. Precision over panic. 7 years of loyalty burned in a single joke. People always imagine betrayal sounds like shouting, like a door slamming. It doesn't. It sounds like a hotel bar, the air conditioner humming, a single laugh too loud, the faint crack of a heart measured in seconds, not screams. Deception, I realized, always smells like cologne. That heavy kind, the one you gift on anniversaries because it feels permanent, like trust in a bottle. He noticed me then. Not instantly, that was the insult. It took him 3 seconds too long to register the familiar shape standing behind the roses. When he did, his jaw twitched. Not guilt. Calculation, thought I. "Claire?" His voice pitched upward, feigning surprise. "What are you doing here?" The woman, blonde, 20-something, manicured laugh, turned halfway toward me, eyes wide, not in shame but curiosity. She wasn't the first. I could tell, by the ease of her posture, by how her hand didn't flinch from his. She thought she was untouchable. The bartender froze in place, unsure whether to keep pouring or step away. The man 2 stools down pretended to check his phone. This was the kind of silence that doesn't belong to anyone. Communal discomfort, glossy and suffocating. Ryan reached for the drink in front of him, pretending steadiness. "Honey, it's not what it looks like." Classic line. I almost smiled at the predictability of it. My mind began taking inventory like a strategist at war. Angle of cameras, reflection on the liquor shelves, witnesses' eyes, all evidence, all control. He leaned toward the girl. "Why don't you head up, babe? I'll join you in a minute." He said it in the same tone he once used when I was the only one. The girl hesitated, stood, smoothed her dress, and walked away with slow, deliberate confidence. Her heels clicked across the marble each step, hammering the end of my delusion. He turned back to me, voice low, contrite in the way liars practice. "Claire, I can explain." "You just did," I said quietly. Laughter fluttered somewhere behind us, brittle and forced, like people pretending the show wasn't real. Thin as glass under pressure. I picked up one rose from the bouquet, a single survivor, and set it on his table. "For Denver?" I whispered. His eyes searched mine, looking for chaos, tears, anything human he could manipulate. But I'd already switched languages. I was no longer speaking heartbreak, I was fluent in silence. I turned toward the door. My reflection followed me in every piece of glass I passed. Controlled, elegant, a woman sculpted from composure. They mistook composure for blindness. The sliding doors opened with a sigh, and warm night air met me like a witness. The city outside didn't know it had just become a crime scene, not of blood, but of belief. I walked out slowly, my heels clicking against the marble like punctuation marks at the end of a chapter. No one followed. Not even him. That was the first truth of the night. When a man doesn't chase you, he already let you go long before you walked away. The valet offered a polite nod. I waved him off. I didn't need a car, I needed distance. Across the street, neon signs flickered blue, then pink, then blue again like a dying pulse. I crossed under them, each light striping my face with a different emotion I refused to feel. My reflection in the hotel's glass doors lingered behind me for a moment before fading. Red lipstick. Calm eyes. A woman leaving without permission. That image would haunt him more than any slap could. The city hummed. Cars passed. Strangers laughed. Life moved as if my marriage hadn't just collapsed inside a cocktail glass. I kept walking, hearing the faint echo of my heels follow me down the quiet stretch of the boulevard. There's a particular silence that comes after humiliation. It doesn't shout, it observes. It asks, "What will you do now?" I didn't know yet. But I knew I wouldn't cry here, not under this sterile moonlight that made everything look too clean. Tears are currency. You don't spend them in public. Inside the elevator to my hotel room, 2 floors above my reflection stared back at me again. Same hair pinned up, same necklace he bought me on our 2nd anniversary. I traced it with my fingers. Funny how gifts from love eventually become evidence from a crime scene. The elevator chimed. I stepped out into the hallway, that corporate kind of quiet that smells of bleach and expensive emptiness. I slipped the keycard in and entered. My suitcase sat in the corner, still half open from when I'd packed it that morning, thinking I was flying to surprise him. The roses had left faint red stains on the inside of my wrist. I turned on the tap and washed them away. The mirror above the sink didn't lie. It showed me a woman stripped of illusion but not of control. I studied the face, the posture, the heartbeat beneath the collarbone. I didn't look like someone broken. I looked like someone pausing before a storm. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. His name, Ryan calling. I let it ring. Once. Twice. 7 times. Then silence. A text followed. "Claire, please, let's talk. You misunderstood." I laughed softly, dryly. Misunderstood. The favorite word of men who got caught mid-lie. The next text came quicker. "Can we meet downstairs, please? Just talk." I typed nothing. Deleted the nothing. Then turned my phone face down. I sat on the edge of the bed. The city lights bled through the curtains, painting thin bars of gold across the sheets. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence, constant, mechanical, honest. For a moment, my mind drifted backward. The first time he said he loved me, it was in a hotel room too. I believed him then. I'd believed every late night conference call, every tired smile, every next quarter, things will calm down. You never notice the pattern until it repeats too perfectly. I opened the minibar and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady. That steadiness surprised me. I realized that rage and control can coexist, they just wear different faces. I took out my notebook, the one I always carried for travel plans, budgets, flight itineraries. I opened a blank page. At the top, I wrote one word. Evidence. And beneath it, in date, Thursday 9 p.m. Location, Rosemont Hotel Lobby Bar. Witnesses, bartender, 2 clients on right. Quote, "Relax, baby, my wife thinks I'm in Denver." It wasn't emotion anymore, it was documentation. When people cheat, they think they're rewriting the story. They forget some of us are better editors. I closed the notebook, placed it beside the untouched glass of water. Lay down without undressing, still in my blazer, still wearing his perfume on my skin, though now it smelled foreign. The ceiling lights blurred into halos. I stared at them until they became plans. That was the night I stopped belonging to him. Morning light broke through the curtains like an interrogation lamp. It wasn't gentle, it exposed. The hotel room smelled faintly of roses gone stale, like love left overnight in a vase too small for honesty. I didn't sleep. My body had rested, but my mind had worked silently, relentlessly replaying his words, the laughter, the look that flickered between them. I'd memorized every frame of that betrayal, like evidence logged by a detective. I sat up, reached for my phone. 10 new messages from him. Ryan, I'm sorry. It wasn't what it looked like. Ryan, can we talk, please? Ryan, you're overreacting. By message 5, the tone shifted from guilt to arrogance. By message 10, he sounded certain I'd forgive him again. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the calendar app. Every trip, every conference, every late client dinner. I marked them in red. Then I compared them with my bank alerts. Hotel transactions, restaurant names, gas receipts, all patterns emerged like constellations once you let your eyes adjust to the dark. There it was: February, Dallas. March, Chicago. April, Denver. Always billed under the same travel code, CHL. Company expense, consistent timing, same 2-day duration. I knew Ryan's company's codes from years of planning his travel. C was for client work. HL wasn't one of them. I poured coffee, black, no sugar. The bitterness steadied me. At 10 a.m., I called the airline, his usual frequent flyer line. "Hi," I said sweetly. "I'm confirming my husband's itinerary for accounting. Ryan Calloway, corporate traveler number 6. The agent's voice clicked cheerful. "Sure thing. I see he's due back from Chicago today, not Denver." Chicago. Again. I smiled without joy. The truth was always closer than the lie. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared home network. Years ago, he'd set up Cloud Sync so we could share files more easily. He'd forgotten that I don't forget things. His folders were precise client names, proposal drafts, contracts. Buried under QQ2 forecasts sat a hidden folder. Private. Password locked. The kind of secrecy that begs to be touched. Password attempts. Denver 2019. No Doi. Calloway. No. Her birthday? No. My can't know. Unlocked. I almost laughed. Not at the arrogance, but the simplicity. Men like Ryan think secrecy is cleverness. It's usually confession spelled differently. Inside. Photos. Receipts. Screenshot. Hotel confirmations sent to her email address. Expense approvals marked training session. Selfies: him, shirtless, glass of wine in hand, same background as his business suite. A woman's hand visible at the edge of the frame, her nails painted crimson. Every detail documented. Every lie cataloged. I stared at the screen for a long time, not in disbelief, but in study. There's a point where shock becomes analysis, and pain becomes data. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a witness collecting facts. I copied the entire folder to my drive, then another to a hidden USB key I kept in my wallet. Insurance policy, version 1. A knock on the door broke the silence. Room service. I hadn't ordered anything. Compliments of the gentleman downstairs, the waiter said, rolling in a tray. Pancakes. Orange juice. A folded note pinned under the napkin. "Let's fix this before anyone finds out." The handwriting was his. Still neat. Still confident. I handed the waiter a bill and said softly, "Tell him breakfast is canceled." After he left, I tore the note into 8 perfect pieces. Not out of anger, but geometry. Order must return before war begins. Back at the desk, I opened the file again. Something new caught my eye: an itinerary email dated next week. Client meeting, Los Angeles. Same hotel chain. Same internal code, Seattle. He hadn't stopped. He'd scheduled another lie before even apologizing for the last one. I whispered to no one, "You built your affair on glass, Ryan." My pulse slowed. My mind mapped. The next phase wasn't confrontation, it was collection. Because confrontation ends stories. Collection rewrites them. I reached for my notebook, flipped to the page titled Evidence. Added new lines. Infile path, Calloway Media, KQA forecasts private. In subject, Taylor, Emma. In keyword, C8L. Next event, La, June 14-16. Yani Janj, Observe, record, document. I closed the cover with the precision of a lock clicking shut. When betrayal is complete, it doesn't break you. It drafts you. You start moving like the architect of something larger. I packed the roses into the trash, one by one, leaving no red behind. Then I booked my own flight to Los Angeles. Different hotel. Same dates. Same city. They'd built their plan on glass. I only had to tap. I didn't tell anyone for 3 days. Not my sister. Not my friends. Silence is the most underrated weapon in the world. It gives your enemy room to walk deeper into their own trap. I spent those 3 days collecting myself into order. Emails. Screenshots. Receipts. Every lie documented, time-stamped, aligned. By the end of the third night, my laptop looked less like a device and more like a crime archive. But I needed guidance, not sympathy. And there was only one person I trusted with the kind of truth that needed to be handled with gloves: Evelyn Pierce. Evelyn wasn't family, not by blood. She'd been my boss at a marketing firm years ago, back when I thought loyalty and logic were the same thing. She'd left the corporate world with a severance package and an iron sense of poise, then opened a consulting office downtown. Everyone called her the Velvet Guillotine. Soft voice, clean cuts. I called her on a Thursday morning. She picked up on the first ring. "Claire." Her tone was sharp as ever. "You don't call unless something's on fire." "It's not fire," I said quietly. "It's gasoline." A pause. "Come by," she said. No, small talk. Her office was tucked on the 12th floor of a building that pretended not to exist. No sign, no glass logo, just one black door, one brass handle, one woman who never needed to announce herself. When I walked in, she was already pouring coffee. The kind that smelled expensive enough to confess to. She looked at me once and said, "You've stopped wearing your ring." Observation or judgment? I asked. "Neither," she replied. "Just noting the weather." I handed her the folder digital printouts, USB drive, a neat summary sheet I'd written at 2 a.m., like a project proposal. She scanned the first few pages, brow lifting slightly. Hotel receipts, travel overlaps, employee emails. You didn't come here for legal advice, did you?" "No." "What, then?" "I want to dismantle him," I said, calm as steel. "Not destroy, dismantle, quietly, piece by piece, until he's holding the ruins he built himself." Evelyn smiled, the kind of slow, knowing smile of a general who recognizes another strategist across the table. "Then you're already halfway there," she said. She gestured to the documents. "But this isn't enough. It's motive. We need leverage." Her fingers danced across the keyboard, pulling up corporate records. "Callaway Media, right? His company?" I nodded. She whistled softly. "You know what's interesting about mid-level executives like your husband? They forget paper trails have memories." She found the internal payroll log within minutes, her connection still intact, her skill sharp as ever. "Here," she said, rotating the screen toward me. "Expense code C8. Looks like someone approved personal hotel stays under company travel budgets. Fraud, not just infidelity." That word, fraud, landed heavier than any emotional confession ever could. It gave my pain a legal definition. It gave his betrayal a shape that could bleed. Evelyn leaned back. "You can do two things with this. You can use it to confront him and let him talk his way out of it, or, she smiled faintly. "You can build a narrative, one that ends with him losing everything he built while thinking you were still asleep." I exhaled slowly. "Option 2. Good," she said. "Then we start with evidence consolidation. You'll need documentation backups, timestamp verification, and a secure witness chain. You're not just exposing a cheat, you're triggering corporate accountability." Her precision steadied me. For the first time since that night at the hotel, my heart stopped reacting and started strategizing. "Claire," she said softly, "are you ready for him to hate you?" "He already does," I answered. "He just hasn't said it out loud." Evelyn nodded. "Then he's about to start learning the vocabulary." She stood, crossed the room, opened her desk drawer, and slid a small brown envelope across the table. "What's this?" "Surveillance contract," she said. "Private investigator. Discreet, licensed, and very expensive. Worth every dollar. You'll need him to confirm the law trip details. Once we have proof of misuse of company funds, everything else will fall like dominoes." I traced my finger along the envelope's edge. It felt like holding the first key to a locked future. "Evelyn," I said quietly, "thank you?" "Don't thank me," she replied. "Just don't flinch when it gets ugly." Outside, the city shimmered through tinted glass, tall buildings, reflecting taller lies. For a brief moment I saw my reflection merge with hers in the window, two women, different ages, same expression. The calm before revelation. Evelyn turned back to her desk, slipping her reading glasses on. Go home, she said. Act normal. Let him think the story's still his. I stood, collected the envelope, and walked to the door. Evelyn? I said, turning once more. She didn't look up. Yes. When it's done, I said, I'll bring the champagne. Her mouth curved slightly. Bring the glass too. I like watching it crack. She slid the file across the table. You'll need this, she said. Night felt different when you planned instead of panicked. It had edges, like a blueprint spread across a table, every line intentional. I cleared the bed of clothes and pulled the laptop onto my knees. Evelyn's envelope sat like a small loaded thing beside me. Contract, contact numbers, a list of protocols on chain of custody. It smelled faintly of paper and consequence. I made coffee that tasted like strategy, bitter, hot, no fluff. Then I opened a new document and named it the way you name a project you intend to win: Operation Clarity. Under it I wrote 3 columns: evidence, timeline, audience. Evidence was what I would prove. Timeline was when I would prove it. Audience was who needed to see it for it to matter. Evidence, I filled in first. Hotel receipts, expense approvals, the private folder on his cloud drive, photos, the note from room service. Timeline. June 14-16, his next Seattle trip. Audience. Board, press, if needed, family. The pen moved, like a metronome. The more I wrote, the quieter my hands became. The research was not dramatic. It was tedious, careful, legalistic. I set up 2 new email addresses, burner accounts attached to anonymous phone numbers. I created a secure folder on an encrypted drive and duplicated everything in triplicate. Backups, Evelyn had said. Witness chain, she had said. Don't let emotion be the only thing that speaks for you. I mapped his company's org chart across a whiteboard I'd taped to the wall. Names felt like gears now. CFO who approved travel budgets, HR head who signed off on reimbursements, a compliance officer who filed quarterly audits. Each name had a handler, someone I would need to contact, or, at least, a pressure point I could exploit. I called the PI Evelyn recommended, and left the kind of message that gets action without noise: confirm availability. Surveillance requested. La dates. Code. Seattle. He called back within an hour, with a voice that smelled of late nights and court calendars. He wanted deposit, instructions, and one simple assurance: that I wanted observation, not a scene. I repeated the word observation until it sounded like a promise. Then came the legal work. Evelyn introduced me to a small firm attorney with quiet eyes. We met in a glass cafe that pretended to be casual. The attorney did not. He explained the thresholds: misuse of company funds, conflict of interest, falsified expense reports. He drew lines on a napkin: civil liability, potential criminal exposure, and I watched those lines curve around my husband's name. My nights became a collage of light and reflection. Computer screen glow carved pale facades across my face. Outside, the city blurred into a wash of headlights. Inside, tabs proliferated: LinkedIn profiles of the HR head, archived press releases, the corporate travel policy PDF that always lives a little too deep in the HR site. I read policy language like scripture. Personal travel is non-reimbursable. Any exception requires pre-approval. Pre-approval, I thought, and smiled because I already had email threads suggesting approvals that never happened. I rehearsed questions in my head, as if I were cross-examining a room of witnesses. How did the approval process work? Who signed off on Seattle entries? When did the CFO start signing off on those invoices? If I could show a pattern: small claims at first, then larger reimbursements, it would look less like coincidence and more like a system abused. There were practical things too. I bought a cheap voice recorder, discreet, unflashy, and tested it in the hotel room, tucking it under a lampshade to see what frequencies it caught. I learned the echo patterns of hotel corridors where hushed conversations turned into confessionals. I bought a second phone and set up location tracking apps that could be used later as corroboration. These were not small acts of vindictiveness, they were acts of preservation. I mapped the mistress's public footprint: social accounts, a few business bios, a LinkedIn picture with a glossy conference backdrop. She was young, confident in a way that never worried her about consequence. I watched her posts for weeks, check-ins at various hotels, tagged photos with Ryan's middle management team. Pattern again. The PI confirmed what I suspected. They used the same suite codes repeatedly, always under the thin veil of off-site client meetings. At 3 a.m, I printed a map of the La Hotel floor plan the PI had emailed, suites highlighted, service corridors annotated. I circled the suite numbers where the receipts placed them. I circled again. Small circles turned into an outline that looked like a spider web, elegant, intentional, sticky. Evelyn sent me articles about corporate scandals, cases where executives fell, not because of passion, but because of paperwork. I devoured them like lessons. Each case study was a manual: how the CFO folded, how the board reacted, how shareholders responded when the first inkling of impropriety surfaced. The pattern was merciless and instructive. You don't need to scream to topple an empire. You need to show the creditors the cracks. I scheduled my flight not as a wife seeking confrontation, but as a researcher attending a field study. I packed a small bag, charger, recorder, 2 black outfits, a notebook, and the USB in my wallet. No makeup that night beyond a neutral line. I wanted to be invisible in a way that made witnesses comfortable and conspirators careless. Before I left, I sat in the dark for a long time and looked at the chandelier above my bed. Its crystals caught the streetlight and divided it into shards. I thought about glass, how it can be soft and inviting until pressure finds its weak point. Then it fractures slow at first, then, with sudden speed. By dawn, after a week of careful building, the calls, the backups, the PI's confirmations, Evelyn's legal maps, the web they'd spun around themselves had a hairline fracture. I called it a test because it felt smaller than justice and larger than a hiss of anger. Tests are clinical. They measure reactions. They don't aim to annihilate. They aim to prove a hypothesis that lies leave fingerprints if you know where to look. I woke early, made coffee that tasted like focus, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and the USB key Evelyn had told me to keep. The file I'd copied had a new name now: Callaway Sadal Archive Final. Naming things made them real. Real things can be shown to witnesses. Real things can be used. I drafted an anonymous email. No flourish. No honey betrayal language. Just facts, attached evidence, a subject line that would sting any HR inbox. Possible misuse of corporate funds, immediate review requested. I attached 3 items: a hotel receipt billed to Seattle, a screenshot of an expense approval email that looked like it came from an intern, and a selfie from his business suite with a hand in the frame that matched the nail polish from the private folder. I paused only long enough to breathe, then I hit send. It left the outbox like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples, not waves. That was the point. By 10:30, I'd done something else small and practical. I called the hotel where Ryan's presumed client dinner was scheduled for that evening. I was precise. I gave the concierge a name, a reservation number, and a guest request. Please confirm the private dining room reservation for Mr. Ryan Callaway for tonight. Cancel if not confirmed by 4:00 p.m. A bureaucratic nothing that could be executed without fanfare. The concierge confirmed and promised to follow up. Then I went to the office as if to work, as if my life had not rearranged itself around evidence and alibis. I sat at my desk, logged into the shared calendar on our home computer remotely, and adjusted nothing. Appearances are a kind of camouflage. I wanted to look ordinary. By noon, the first reply came. All tart. Short, professional. We are opening an inquiry after receiving an anonymous report. Please hold all travel reimbursements for review. My heart thudded in a way that was neither elation nor dread. It was measurement. The hypothesis was passing. I watched the clock like an investigator at a watchtower. Minutes became a slow procession. At 2:13 p.m., my phone vibrated. Ryan, calling. I let it ring twice. He left a voicemail. Claire, pick up. This is ridiculous. Don't turn this into anything. His voice was sharp, irritated. The first crack of panic in his tone was a hairline I could already see. I called him back, unrehearsed, truthful seeming. Hey, I said, light and distant. Everything okay? My voice was all the weaponry I needed at that minute. Why are you calling me right now? He tried to sound casual. He failed. People are talking. HR says there's an inquiry. Did you? His sentence broke. He rearranged it into accusation. I got an email too, I said, like an innocent sharing gossip. Someone mentioned reimbursement flags. Weird, right? I kept my voice casual. I let him hear the slight worry that made him feel superior. There's a specific terror that lives in people who hide things. It's not the fear of being caught, but the fear of being exposed to other people. I watched him twist on the line like a fish. I don't know what you're talking about, he said finally. Maybe someone is messing with the system. Maybe, I said. Or maybe someone made a mistake. My tone invited him to explain, to say the words that would save him. He didn't. After we hung up, I sat back and let time do the work I'd started. HR would interview. Paperwork would be pulled. The concierge would call and cancel the dining room if no confirmation arrived. Little pressures applied in the right places compound into structural failure. At 4:30, the hotel called. They couldn't confirm the private dining room without a direct card authorization. The reservation was canceled by protocol. The mistress, if she'd been expecting a private celebration, now had only a corridor and a canceled booking. Small humiliation, but humiliation nonetheless. It was enough to make the unexamined face the fact of scrutiny. That evening, Ryan called twice and texted more times than I cared to count. His messages alternated between blistering anger and apology rehearsed into sincerity. We need to talk. Please don't make this worse. I can fix this. Who did this? He was frantic in a way that made his earlier arrogance look like a costume slipping on stage. I didn't answer most of them. I answered one. A short message that said, HR does their job. Calm, factual. An unblinking mirror. Across town, a woman I'd never met sat in a canceled private dining room, her phone buzzing with messages from a man who had just been told his expenses were under review. She might have been confused. She might have been furious. She might have thought me cruel. She did not yet know the architecture of what I was doing. To her, my moves were a series of inconvenience. To me, they were the first measured chips at the foundation. That night, Ryan came home late. He parked, fumbled with the keys, and walked in like someone who had rehearsed the steps of a lie until the choreography felt like truth. He stood in the doorway, looking for the confrontation he'd expected. He found instead a calm apartment, a notebook left open on the table, a coffee cup cooling on a coaster. I did not rise to meet him. I let him stand. Claire, he began, voice thin with a forced steadiness. We need to talk. He moved toward me, half pleading, half commanding. You already did, I said. I closed the notebook another seal and set it on the table where he could see it. You spoke in the lobby. He tried to smile. It was small and brittle, like a facade forced into place. I can explain. He searched my face for leverage, anything to make the world revert to its old tolerances. His explanation did not come. He tried sentences, then stopped himself. The silence that followed was not for him to fill. It was for him to realize the ledger had been opened. He looked at the notebook, then at me, then away. For the first time since the lobby, something broke in his posture. His shoulders drooped by a degree I could measure. I could see the math of his downfall begin in the way he held himself. He attempted one more smile, less a smile than a reflex. His smile broke before his sentence did. The first strike always stirs the sleeping beast. The second teaches you how fast it can thrash. 2 days after HR froze the reimbursements, the quiet between Ryan and me became something with edges. He stopped coming home early. His phone stayed glued to his palm, screen flashing blue in dim corners. He had stopped calling me Claire. He'd started calling me Listen. Then came the retaliation. It began with whispers from mutual friends, soft, poisoned lines like, he's worried about you? Said you've been unstable lately? I could almost hear Evelyn's dry chuckle in my head. They'll always try to discredit the historian before they question the history. I didn't react. I recorded everything. Screenshots of messages, timestamps of calls, voice notes of his late-night rants when he thought I wasn't listening. He filed for temporary separation through a lawyer who looked more like an accountant with a grudge. The paperwork came wrapped in politeness, irreconcilable differences, a line meant to cut without bleeding. When I called Evelyn, she laughed once sharp and satisfied. "He's moving fast," she said. "He's moving scared," I corrected. Still, fear breeds strategy. Ryan began tidying the battlefield. He withdrew joint funds for liquidity. He changed passwords. He sold the second car, citing maintenance costs. Each move calculated, disguised as reason. I countered quietly. Bank alerts redirected to my private email. Copies of documents filed with my attorney. Notarized timestamps. I turned his counterattack into a trail of evidence he didn't realize he was handwriting for me. The company inquiry heated up. Here are scheduled interviews. Rumors spread across his office floors faster than memo sheets. I knew because Evelyn still had friends in the building, women who understood the art of information flow. One called from a blocked number. "Claire," she said, voice low. "He's saying you leaked company data, claims you hacked his files." "Interesting," I replied. "I wonder how his private folder ended up on a corporate device." "You have proof." "I have sequence," I said. "Proof comes after timing." That night, he came home with fury stitched across his face. The kind of fury that comes from fear wrapped in arrogance. He threw the separation papers onto the table like a challenge. "This ends now," he said. "Agreed?" I replied. He blinked. He'd expected a plea, not a mirror. "You've ruined my reputation at work," he snapped. "Do you even realize what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "You did it. I just stopped covering it." He laughed, a dry, nervous sound. "You think you can win this? You've got nothing. You hacked into my files. That's a federal crime." I met his gaze. "You left the folder in our shared cloud. Password. My wife can't know, remember?" Silence. The kind that sharpens the air. He turned away, muttering, "You're paranoid. You always were." I let him speak. Every word, another self-indictment. Later that night, he left for a walk. I followed, 2 blocks behind, quiet, watching. He met her, the woman from the hotel, near a cafe closed for the night. I recorded them standing under a flickering streetlight, his hands slicing through the air as he ranted. She looked scared now, not seductive. The wind carried fragments of his words to me. "Her emails, she's dangerous." I didn't need more. When he returned home, I was seated at the table again, notebook open. "You followed me?" he asked. "No," I said. I verified. He didn't sleep that night. I could hear him pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear, whispering damage control to whoever still answered his calls. The rhythm of his footsteps was the sound of an empire learning about gravity. By dawn, Evelyn texted, "Company board convening. HR found discrepancies in 7 expense reports. They're lawyering up." He tried to preempt it, of course emailed HR claiming he'd been targeted by a vindictive spouse. They forwarded the message to legal. Legal forwarded it to compliance. Each forward was a nail. At breakfast, he poured coffee like a man in a courtroom. "You're destroying both of us," he said. "No," I answered, buttering toast. "You're showing everyone how destruction sounds when it's polite." He didn't reply. He left the mug half full. That afternoon, Evelyn called again. "His company will move to protect itself. They'll isolate him, freeze access, then investigate deeper. That's standard procedure." "And me?" "You stay still. Stillness is invisible." I closed my eyes and let the quiet stretch. I realized something fundamental. Counterattacks are useful. They reveal exactly where your opponent believes you're strongest. He'd attacked my sanity, my legality, my reputation. That meant those were his weak points. I wrote it down in my notebook. Weapon used, gaslight. My response, documentation. Result, self-exposure. He thought I was cornered. He didn't see I'd been building a map on the floor beneath him. When the phone rang again, it wasn't Ryan. It was the investigator Evelyn had hired. His voice was steady. Mrs. Calloway, we have the footage. It's clear. Send it encrypted, I said. It's already in your inbox. I opened the email. The thumbnail showed Ryan and the woman entering a hotel suite together, time-stamped, her corporate badge visible. Corporate funds, corporate hotel, corporate misconduct, documented beyond denial. They just handed me their blueprint. I scheduled the hearing for a Tuesday morning. I chose Tuesday because it felt ordinary enough to disarm and important enough to hurt. No theatrics. No late-night calls for sympathy. Just a room, a panel, and evidence laid out like surgical instruments. Evelyn and the attorney arrived early. She wore her armor, a black coat that swallowed light. He carried a legal binder thick with affidavits. The PI sat quietly in the back, his camera feed muted on a small laptop screen. I felt like a conductor 3 beats before a symphony began. We walked into the conference room with the calm of people who know their lines. The boardroom smelled faintly of lemon polish. A projector hummed. Chairs arranged themselves around the long table like teeth, waiting to be examined. Ryan arrived late. He glanced at me as if disbelief were still a possible defense. I met his look with a small, controlled smile. He tried to find his old dominance there, but it had been repossessed by quiet facts. Facts do not negotiate. Evelyn started. She didn't speak in drama. She spoke in sequence. We received an anonymous tip alleging misuse of travel reimbursements, she said. We opened an inquiry. The records corroborate the allegation. Her voice was small, terrible, like someone pointing at a fracture in a load-bearing beam. The attorney next to me projected the first document. Expense forms. Receipts. Corporate cards charged for suites, booked under C8 Del. A highlight traced a path from Ryan's corporate card to invoices for private dinners and rooms billed to his account. A chorus of small gasps circled the room like a disturbed flock. He'd practiced plausible deniability. We practiced plausible proof. The PI's footage played. A time-stamped clip of Ryan entering a suite with the same woman flickered onto the screen. The audio was clear enough, murmured laughter, the scrape of a chair. The woman's badge, visible in one frame, matched a company directory image. There was no melodrama in the clip. Just 2 people, crossing a boundary on corporate expense. I felt no cruelty. Only the satisfaction of a lock turning. Then Evelyn dropped the second file, the internal approvals stream. Emails showed an assistant pushing expense items forward. A name circled like a trap, the intern who'd been eager and careless. Another name, a CFO who signed without double-checking. The chain was not perfect, but it was sufficient. It painted a picture of negligence, maybe malfeasance. Ryan's face changed. First color, then lines. He tried to speak. His mouth moved like someone trying to retrieve a word fallen between couch cushions. The compliance officer asked 2 simple questions. Did you authorize personal stays under C8L? His yes would scald him. His no would require proof. He flailed between both. Flashbacks traced alongside my presentation memory cuts I planted like breadcrumbs earlier. I remembered the first time he'd kissed me in a hotel corridor during a supposed work seminar. I remembered the way he told me stories of client dinner where deals were made over red wine. I remembered signing forms for his late reimbursements, trusting him the way you trust gravity. But these were not confessions. They were context. I fed them to the room slowly, like a patient surgeon. Evidence first. Memory second. Motive last. Evelyn slid a final packet across the table. It contained copies of the room service note, the selfies, the travel approvals, and a notarized statement from the PI confirming dates. The packet also included an encrypted file with a ledger showing a pattern of reimbursements that grew in size over time, small at first, then larger, like a man's appetite made bold by concealment. There was a pause long enough for the air to become solid. Is there anything else? The compliance head asked, cautious. Yes. I spoke then not as the jilted wife, but as the person who had read the room and learned its architecture. There is also the fact that these reimbursements were declared as client development expenses. My voice was steady, flat like a blade. They were not. They were personal. Heads turned. Phones lit up. The compliance officer tapped his keyboard and then turned to Ryan. "We'll need a formal explanation," he said. "And until then, access to corporate cards will be suspended." Ryan's shoulders slumped by degrees. His eyes searched mine for forgiveness. There was none to be found. Only an editor closing a long chapter. The fallout started the moment we left the room. Howard drafted interim measures. Legal scheduled a deeper audit. The intern was quietly placed on leave. The CFO called a meeting to explain the approval procedures to the board. Ryan received an email about suspension pending investigation. People tell you revenge feels like a thunderclap. They're wrong. Revenge is a series of quiet calculations arriving at an inevitable conclusion. It is a sequence of small, precise movements that leave little for chaos to chew on. The masterstroke is often unseen until the dominoes fall. You only notice the sound after the last piece clatters. On the subway ride home, I thought about all the nights I had feigned sleep, while he came home smelling like the world. I thought about the small ways trust had been banked, and then withdrawn without notice. I thought about pride and how it can bury guilt beneath a tidy stack of receipts. Evelyn texted, "Well, played." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The work had been done. The architecture of truth had done its job. That night Ryan called, voice small and thin as a wire. "Claire, please, can we talk? I can fix this." He still thought he could fix things with words. "You told them the story tonight," I replied. "You gave them the evidence." My voice was precise. "You built your defense with paperwork. You built your collapse the same way." He didn't answer. He listened to the silence like someone listening for a verdict. Every lie they told now belonged to me. There is a moment when silence becomes so heavy, it tips into sound, like glass, finally surrendering under stress. Tuesday morning gave way to that sound. The news broke before lunch. A trade site ran the headline first. Callaway Media executive under investigation for misuse of funds. It was sterile, corporate, and perfect. Within hours, local outlets mirrored it with hungrier language. Corporate scandal unfolds amid affair allegations. The story was precise, the details uncanny. Dates, expense codes, hotel receipts, timelines. All accurate. None traceable to me. Ryan's name trended on a platform he once used to post motivational quotes about integrity. By midday, his office issued a statement. "Mr. Callaway has been placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending an internal investigation." The board distanced itself. The CFO resigned, for personal reasons. The intern's LinkedIn went dark. Every domino that had quietly waited through months of subtle positioning began to fall, graceful as choreography. I sat by the window of a coffee shop across from his building, watching through the reflection instead of the glass. People moved like information fast, scattered, avoiding eye contact. Laptops glowed with the story they were all pretending not to read. Inside me, nothing screamed. No fireworks, no drumbeat. Just calm recognition that this was the sound of cause meeting consequence. The phone rang twice. I didn't answer. Evelyn texted instead, "It's live everywhere." "You did it." I typed back, "No, no." He did. That afternoon, the company called an emergency meeting. I knew because the PI sent me the recording, a sea of muted faces on a video call. Executives staring into the kind of silence only guilt can arrange. Ryan tried to speak, but every word landed on the echo of evidence. Someone coughed. Someone else clicked, "Leave meeting." His badge access deactivated at 4:17 p.m. The security footage showed him standing at the glass doors, swiping again and again, as if the lock would remember loyalty. It didn't. At 5:00, the press arrived. Cameras lined the sidewalk, microphones angled toward the lobby. I watched from across the street, coat collar turned up, anonymity intact. When Ryan finally walked out, his tie was gone, his face gray with disbelief. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Callaway, were company funds used for personal trips?" He blinked into the light, said nothing. Flash. Flash. Leon. The shutters caught his collapse frame by frame, immortalized in pixels. People around me whispered. Someone gasped softly as the photo hit their feed in real time. I stirred my coffee. One more camera flash flared in the window's reflection. For a second it looked like lightning trapped in glass. Later that night, I drove to the river. Parked where city lights broke against the water in fractured streaks. Opened my notebook, the same one that started with evidence. I turned to a blank page and wrote one line. Truth doesn't need volume. Just exposure. Behind me, the city exhaled sirens distant, air thick with rain. Ryan tried calling again. I let it ring out, then opened the newsfeed. His company's shares had dipped 3% in a single day. Comment sections hummed with moral outrage disguised as fascination. The woman's name surfaced by evening, accompanied by blurry photos from conferences and parties. She deactivated her accounts before midnight. I should have felt triumphant. But triumph is loud, and I'd spent months mastering quiet. What I felt was finality, a clean, sharp stillness. At home, I poured a glass of wine and turned off every light, except one. The television murmured in the background. Investigation continues. Sources confirm misuse of travel funds. My phone buzzed with messages, some from friends pretending to be shocked, others from reporters fishing for quotes. I answered none. Because I already knew the truth. You don't need to shout to end a story. You just let it unfold in public, illuminated by the very spotlights your betrayer once sought for himself. And suddenly everyone could see through them. When empires fall, they don't crash, they crumble in sequence. Piece by piece, privilege by privilege, until the dust starts to recognize your name. Ryan's collapse began with an email. One line from the board: your position is hereby terminated effective immediately pending legal review. No sentiment, no farewell. Just a clean incision through the career he'd built on borrowed integrity. He came home that evening carrying a cardboard box, the kind every fired man eventually learns to fill. A mug, a few pens, 2 framed certificates that once made him feel irreplaceable. He set it down by the door like something that might explode if handled wrong. I hope you're happy, he said. I'm orderly, I replied. Happiness was never the goal. He stared at me like a man seeing his reflection in a shattered mirror, all the right pieces, none aligned. They think I stole from them, he said, voice cracking under its own weight. They're threatening to press charges. They think? I asked softly. Or are they annoy? He flinched. He tried pacing, rehearsing a redemption arc only he could believe in. If you hadn't gone snooping, if you just talked to me. Talked, I interrupted. Ryan, you lied so fluently it became your mother tongue. He sat down, buried his face in his hands. I watched in silence, because pity is still a form of fuel, and I wasn't feeding him anymore. By the next week, the media had moved from speculation to confirmation. His company released an audit summary. Misuse of corporate funds, verified. Disciplinary review, completed. Legal handover, pending. It was all procedural dry words carrying wet ruin. Our mutual friends began to vanish like polite ghosts. Invitations stopped arriving. Conversations dried up into whispers. Social circles are made of glass too. Once cracked, they don't hold anyone's weight. He tried to regain control the way men like him always do, through narratives. He told people I had set him up. That I'd been jealous, vindictive, unstable. But the problem with lies is that they age quickly when exposed to daylight. And daylight was all he had left. Evelyn called one afternoon to tell me the final audit was closed. He's been blacklisted in his industry, she said. No one will hire him with that record. Good, I said. Are you satisfied? She asked. Satisfaction. The word rolled strangely in my mouth. I'm finished, I said instead. Because satisfaction implies pleasure, and there was none. There was peace, yes. But peace is quieter than justice, heavier too. Ryan moved out 2 days later. No goodbye, no apology. Just the faint smell of regret that clung to his shirts as he packed them. I stood in the doorway, watching him load his car, watching the last 7 years compress into 2 suitcases and a half-empty life. When he turned to face me one last time, his eyes were hollow. You destroyed me, he said. No, I answered. You documented your own destruction. I just filed it properly. He didn't reply. He drove away. The sound of his tires against the pavement felt like punctuation, sharp, final, deserved. The following week, I received an official letter, the divorce settlement. Clean, efficient, weighted entirely in my favor. His lawyer had no fight left. The evidence was too loud. His silence was cheaper. I signed it while sipping tea. Each stroke of my pen was a requiem. News outlets stopped calling after that. Their interest decayed, as all outrage does. He became another cautionary footnote in a corporate ethics manual somewhere. Case Study 14, Personal Misconduct and Financial Oversight. Sometimes I still saw him online, new accounts, new photos, attempts to rebuild a self he could stand to look at. He posted quotes about resilience, about forgiveness. He never mentioned truth. Once, in a weak moment, he emailed, "I don't sleep. I hear things breaking inside my head. Was it worth it?" I typed back 3 words. "Transparency hurts, doesn't it?" I nodded. Then I deleted the draft. Silence was answer enough. Evelyn and I met for dinner not long after. She raised a glass of white wine, smiled that small knowing smile. "To closure," she said. "To clarity," I corrected. We clinked glasses. When I returned home that night, I walked through the quiet apartment, no tension, no noise. Just the faint scent of lavender from the candle I'd lit. My reflection in the window looked almost peaceful. People think revenge is explosive. But it isn't. It's erosion, subtle, inevitable, complete. And in the end, glass never shatters cleanly, it cuts on the way down. For weeks after his departure, the silence in the apartment became its own kind of weather. It didn't haunt, it observed. I learned its rhythms: morning quiet that tasted like steam from fresh coffee, night quiet that hummed like a clock behind a wall. In that stillness, the shock began to decompose into clarity. I found myself walking again, long stretches through the city where no one knew my story. Parks, waterfronts, the kind of anonymous places where you could dissolve without notice. At first, I thought I was chasing distraction. But it wasn't that. It was calibration, learning what peace actually sounded like after months of weaponized politeness and rehearsed laughter. I realized I'd been living for years with background noise, masquerading as love. The late emails. The half-listened sentences. The phantom promises of next weekend. Noise that once felt like companionship now revealed itself for what it was: camouflage. I started rebuilding small things first, the kind that don't make headlines. A new set of dishes. A different pillow. Curtains that let in more light. Little edits that signaled ownership of space again. One evening, I found the notebook, the same one that began with evidence. It was sitting on the shelf, where I'd left it after the settlement. The cover had a faint coffee ring, the ink slightly faded. I opened to the first page. Date, Thursday 9 p.m, relax baby, my wife thinks I'm in Denver. Reading it didn't hurt anymore. It felt like reading someone else's case file, familiar, but impersonal. I traced the handwriting and realized that somewhere between evidence and closure, I had become someone else entirely. Revenge, I learned, isn't about noise. It's about clarity. It's about finally hearing your own thoughts without interruption. It's about standing in the echo of your own boundaries and not feeling guilt for the silence that follows. I began writing again, not reports this time, but reflections. Notes about patterns, about trust, about how easy it is to confuse endurance with devotion. I wrote because paper doesn't interrupt you. It doesn't gaslight. It doesn't charm. It just receives. Evelyn called every few days, mostly out of habit. "How's the calm?" she asked once. "Uncomfortable," I said. "That's how healing feels when you've mistaken chaos for company," she replied. She was right. The house no longer smelled like him. His cologne had long been replaced by lavender oil and ink. Even my footsteps sounded different on the hardwood, softer, unobserved. I found peace not in forgetting him, but in remembering myself before him, the version that once believed love didn't require proof. One night, I visited the same hotel where everything began. Not out of nostalgia, but symmetry. The lobby had changed: new decor, new staff, same glass bar. I ordered tea instead of wine. Watched strangers laugh. Listen to the same kind of hollow flirtations that once cost me years. The bartender smiled politely. Waiting for someone? No, I said. Just watching endings look like beginnings. He nodded without understanding. When I walked out, I paused before the same marble counter where I'd once set down those roses. I imagined them there again, upright, perfect, temporary. Then I walked away. Outside, the air was cold, but kind. Closure doesn't announce itself. It settles in your bones quietly, like gravity. It doesn't forgive or forget, it balances the ledger. That night, back home, I wrote one final line in my notebook beneath every entry, every plan, every scar of evidence. Peace is not the absence of noise. It's the absence of explanation. And for the first time in years, I didn't need one. A year later, the world had rearranged itself. Slowly, like glass cooling into a new shape. My name now lived on letterheads, not in footnotes. After the settlement cleared, I'd taken the money that once paid for his lies and built something honest with it, a boutique consulting firm for women, rebuilding after betrayal. Evelyn called it beautiful irony. I called it sustainability. We rented a small office on the 12th floor, sunlight, clean desks, walls painted in calm beige instead of sterile white. Every morning, women walked in carrying different versions of the same silence I once knew too well. And every afternoon, they left carrying plans. Legal strategies, financial education, personal boundaries written in ink pie. They told their stories. I listened, not as a savior, but as someone fluent in aftermath. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of my old life in theirs, the confusion, the fear, the way they still defended men who didn't deserve verbs like trust or love. But I never interrupted. Healing, I'd learned, doesn't like to be rushed. It prefers witnesses to lectures. Evelyn joined as a partner a few months in. She handled the contracts and training sessions. I handled the strategy. Together we turned my revenge into a blueprint others could build with. What began as retaliation had evolved into reconstruction. People asked if I ever heard from Ryan. I did once. A single letter arrived in spring, forwarded by an old address. His handwriting, shaky. The envelope smelled faintly of rain and regret. Claire, I lost everything. I think about you every day. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I finally understand. You were the only thing real in my life, and I treated you like air, invisible until I couldn't breathe. Ryan. I folded it carefully and slid it into a file labeled archive. Not to revisit, not to reread, but to remind myself that closure sometimes writes back. Outside, my city had thawed into spring. The same river that once caught my reflection now held sky instead of sorrow. One Friday evening after work, I stayed late in the office. The building was quiet, the sun setting through the glass walls in fractured amber. I stood there, staring at my reflection again, older, sharper, softer, in all the right places. I thought about the first time I'd seen him in that hotel lobby. How humiliation had cracked something inside me that night. And how, through those cracks, light had entered. My phone buzzed a message from Evelyn. We did good today. I smiled. We did, I texted back. And tomorrow, better. I closed my laptop, walked to the window, and pressed my hand against the cool glass. The city lights flickered below, 1,000 tiny stories colliding in the dark. For the first time, I didn't feel like a footnote in someone else's narrative. I felt like the author. In the distance, I could see the same hotel, its new sign glowing faintly against the skyline. I imagined the marble bar, the sound of laughter, the clink of glasses. Somewhere, another woman might be walking in with roses, hoping for honesty. I wanted to tell her what I had learned, that truth doesn't always come wrapped in kindness, but it's the only thing that sets you free. I whispered it anyway to the glass, to the city, to the ghost of my former self. They taught me silence, I said. I turned silence into glass. And the glass, ever faithful, reflected it back unbroken.